Hey, Mike.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Welcome everybody to the Pop Culture SquadCast Live. Second show this week. We are rocking and rolling.
We should have asked Walter to do this one. Maybe on another Thursday we should
Thursday.
do.
When we do get Walter on, it will be on Thursday for sure.
Yes, there you go.
Absolutely. We will do that. It's we're doing this and it's great. And normally I was a little nervous because we kind of cover the early stuff about what goes on in the world of pop culture and comics and stuff like that in the first our first segment or so. The news is coming fast and furious. Nobody can, like, it used to be that people would wait till San Diego and hold all their stuff, and now it's just like, I can't wait, I'm telling everybody everything now, and it's just every 2 seconds there's new news coming out.
Well, it's because you'd get lost. Your announcements at San Diego would get lost amongst all the other announcements.
They're getting lost now.
But now, once again, we're in that same situation because everybody says, well, I'll just do it the week before. And everybody is saying that. It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer designed a way for you to identify your car by putting, the little thing on top of your antenna.
Right. And everybody had the same thing.
And he looks out in the parking lot, and every car looks exactly the same. They all have that little ball.
I have a very unique thing on my suitcase that I travel with all the time, and I'm not telling anybody what it is. So we'll just keep that way. I will prevent the Homer problem from happening.
Well, for suitcases, if you're going to check luggage and stuff, anything you do is good.
Yeah.
If you didn't dislike Apple so much, you could get one of those AirTag things.
Oh yeah, I know people. We have friends who do that, and they all of a sudden know that their stuff didn't make it. So, first thing we want to talk about, because you texted me earlier, and we wanted to talk about a cover. So let's bring it into the screen. And you're like, I want to talk about this for a minute. So
yeah.
What's up?
Well, first of all, it's by our friend Dan Parent.
Of course, it's by Dan. It's fantastic.
Who does wonderful covers, wonderful storytelling, and spectacular convention sketches.
Yes.
Really great. But what struck me as odd, well, there are a lot of things, but what struck me as odd is what's right up there on the top of the cover, where it says the official comic book of the USA. Now, okay, it's official. I'm buying that. I just want to know who officiates that.
What I like is that it's like there's a American flag behind it too.
Yeah,
it's very, very patriotic.
Oh yeah. No, you're right. Wow, that's weird.
It's a very patriotic Archie.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Folks maybe up in Canada might or something.
Well, we have a Canadian on the show tonight, so we have to.
We can ask him. We can ask him if he's mortally offended by that. But I just want to, okay, fine. Is it Archie that's the official comic book of the USA, or is it Archie Jumbo Comics that's the official?
I don't know. I think this is something for Library of Congress for them to figure out and determine. Seems to be that.
Yes. This is why
since we're talking about Dan, one of the things that the thing that makes Dan's Archie work what it is. Excuse me.
What's in
smiles? Sorry, it's the smiles, it's the faces, it's the light in the eyes that he's able to do. Very simple. They're very simple, designs and drawings, but the amount of emotion that he puts into the face, and particularly the joy that he puts into faces, is really, really excellent.
Oh, I quite agree. He has his technique of simplifying, the human body and its various elements. I mean, that's mastering Archie, because you can't do that fine line stuff. So how do you express? How do you get expressive? You can do a little bit of it through color that you couldn't do before, and that's nice. But you do it in the eyes. You do it in the eyes, and that's how that works. And look at that cover. Just,
it's just some faces,
Yeah. Yeah, you got 4 characters. 3 of them have their eyes open.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Jughead actually has eyes.
Not sure.
Well, when he's surprised, he does. But also his hat used to fly up. That doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, it's so I like the fact that we started with that. I think it's cool. I think it's a neat thing that we found. It's important. It's fun. We do have a bit of, we all, a lot of times we end up talking about, some bad news, and we have a little bit of bad news today. Bob Newhart passed away. And I kind of wanted your take on it. I mean, he's been around your whole life, and your life is longer than mine.
You
have to understand, folks who are watching, that every time I ask a question like this, there's a non-small chance that Mike has met people that, because Mike knows everybody and has met everybody. So I don't know if that's the case. I'm just looking for your opinion on your.
Well, he actually made it out of Chicago while I was still in my teens, early teens. That I did see him in a nightclub, working in a nightclub in Chicago at Mr. Kelly's, which was a fabulous nightclub where I saw everybody, and they did not mind the fact that I wasn't 21. So I did see him, but I never really had the chance to talk with him. He was an outsider in the comedy world that I hung out in, because I hung out with Second City people.
Right.
And, for example, Shelley Berman, who had that same telephone act. And they both created it at roughly the same time. There, I know there's some anger there. But
you see, folks, I didn't know this was coming, but I see there's actual first person contact that I bring in when we have Mike on the show. So go ahead, keep going.
So I met Shelley Berman a couple of times, maybe twice at Second City events, reunions, that sort of thing. And the one thing that friends of mine told me when I approached Shelley was, do not talk about Bob Newhart. Don't ask him about Bob Newhart. Okay. So I asked my father. Now, my father's favorite movie theater was the first air-conditioned movie theater in America. And that's why it was his favorite, because it was hot out. And he went to the movies at the Central Park Theater, which Bellman and Katz chain. Bob Balaban is from that family, so is ABC. And I knew that his job, that Shelley's job as a child, was to work in the deli that was next door to that theater. So I asked my father about that, and he said, "Who are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, the kid who took your money at the deli, because they wouldn't let employees deal with the cash during the Depression. They let
right.
family deal with the cash."
Right. Only
I understand that. And he says, "That's little Sheldon?" which today is funny for a whole different reason. But at the time it was like, yeah. He says, "That's Shelley Berman?" And I says, "Yeah." And he says, "Newhart steal his act?" And I was like, my father was not the least bit hip to Hollywood stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Care less, but he knew about that.
That's
so
great.
My enduring memory of Bob Newhart, who was a genius and a wonderful human being, from what I understand, everybody says that, and in Hollywood that's not common. And, you know, in 94, we knew he probably wasn't going to be doing another sitcom, but the ones he did were pretty damn good. Plus, he honored the comics business in his last and least successful TV show. But
true, that's fair. That is true. Absolutely, that's important.
Paul Power worked on that too.
Who did?
Paul Power, the cartoonist. And yeah, that was kind of cool.
That was cool.
It was well written too. I thought it was too good for the room, actually.
I'm sorry. So it's been, as I said, a full news couple of days. Like this is less than 48 hours. A whole lot of crap is dropped, and we're going to talk about some of it really quick, and then we're going to get into our guests. So please, guys, stay tuned. We're going to talk to Tom Fowler and Fred Van Lente about their new Kickstarter program that's about to launch.
They're aging in the green room.
I know.
Yeah,
I know, but we need to get to this. First thing I want to get to is this just got announced, I think, today from Dark Horse. It's Neptune. It's by Michael Conrad. I think it's coming in the fall. I think September or October. Michael Conrad and Nathan Uten. I spoke to Michael last month, and he's like, at some point, he's going to be writing, like, it's going to appear like he's writing everything, because everything is just kind of like piled up, even though it hasn't happened. So hopefully we'll get him on the show and we can talk about this again. But I'm excited about it. I like him doing his own stuff. I like him doing licensed stuff. I like him doing his own stuff.
Yeah, I had seen that announcement today, I guess today, maybe yesterday. And
yeah, I think it was
today. What really grabbed my eye was that cover art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez.
So that's the Archie piece. This is the big news. I mean, this was
define big.
Well, listen, it's going to impact the comic books you're reading, right? Because all of the
comic books that I had been reading.
Okay. The comic books you're reading, you're either not going to be reading anymore or they're going to be different. So there is DC is kind of, they're doing something. I don't know what to call it. There's going to be all new stories, continuing stories, new creative teams. Some of the creative teams are good. Some of them are, you know, I'm not going to offer an opinion if I don't say they're good. But there's some kind of nice looking art. Like this kind of looks cool. This is Dan Mora there's going to be a new Superman. Dan Mora is going to be doing Superman with Josh Williamson.
And that's a beautiful piece.
This is from the Absolute Universe, which is also launching in October. So the Absolute Universe is launching in October, folks. It is heralded and shepherded by Scott Snyder, and we don't really know all about it yet. I don't have enough details to do it, but it is going to be an alternate universe that, as I said, as the first graphic shows, they're kind of going to be a new one universe versus their existing current universe, and there's going to be, there's going to be some banging up against each other, and Darkseid's involved. So
first of all, there's two congratulations I have to give. Number one, I have to congratulate you, Bob, because you said all of that without once saying ultimate. I admire that. Number two, DC figured out a way to still reboot right on schedule their entire line twice without using the word crisis. That's amazing to me. So, sure, I'm sure it's wrong, but that's always true at DC.
I'm sure that is that those actual discussions occurred. Like the use of words that you've just mentioned that I didn't mention. I think I'm sure those conversations happened.
Because I've been in those meetings, and that's why I'm here right now. So I can use those words. And I would not be 100% certain that everybody up and down that food chain gets the reference.
No, I'm sure they don't. So Tom Taylor's ending with the current arc on Nightwing, which I've enjoyed tremendously. It's ending. And Dan Waters is going to take over, and I like Dan Waters, so I'm excited for that. Everybody knows I'm reading Nightwing no matter what it is, except when he's Rick, and that's just stupid. This is Kelly.
It wasn't a bad story. It just went on too long.
Well, someday we'll talk about that.
Okay.
This is from the new Absolute universe that is Wonder Woman, and it is written by Kelly Thompson and art by somebody else. I don't remember exactly. I'm sorry. I apologize to the artist. We'll talk about this later. All right. So that's a bit of art that I have. I will say the one thing. I looked through the list of what's been announced for the main universe stuff that we have existing. A lot of those titles have been announced. One is not officially announced, but it's getting announced tomorrow, and that's Philip Kennedy Johnson is going to be writing Batman and Robin with Javi Fernandez on art. That's great. But I think this one kind of slipped under the radar. I haven't seen any art from it, but John Layman is going to be writing Titans. And if John Layman's writing something, I'm excited. And the fact that he's writing a mainline DC book, I think that's weird and cause for celebration.
There are probably a half dozen DC books being done right now, regular books. I'm not talking about miniseries here. That I like, that I enjoy, that I look forward to. Wonder Woman and Birds of Prey being at the top of that list.
Kelly Thompson is staying on Birds of Prey with Sammy Basri on the art.
Yeah. And, these are books that are they're less than a year old.
Wonder Woman is staying the same.
That
story is continuing.
It's nice to see that they're not that stupid. I mean, I know they're not that stupid, but they've done stuff like that before. So I'm glad that they're leaving Wonder Woman alone. But the Wonder Woman from this Absolute universe, which sounds like vodka to me,
I have whiskey, so I can't help
I have grape juice.
That's good.
Is not at all related to Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman mythos, in any way, shape, or form. She's not.
No, these are all of. Okay, so what I do know, and one of the interesting things about being in the position, you and I have talked about this on the show, that there's so much that we know now, and you mentioned that you know more about things that you can't talk about now than you ever did in your history, in your career in comics. And I've known about this thing for some time. I don't tell things that I'm not supposed to tell. And it allows me to stay in good relationships with people and keep them going.
Of course.
I've known about this for a while.
Your word is your word, and you should never go back on that.
Of course. But the understanding from what people can get from it is that there's going to be a separate universe where all of the characters that you know are going to have new interest, change that word, new and different origins and histories, and it's going to be different than the main universe. But the main DC universe that you know is going to exist. It's going to be a second line. There will be some smashing against, and hopefully then it will go off and be its own thing, and just people will enjoy it as its world. I hope it doesn't just. I hope it works well. I hope it works well, and everybody can enjoy comic books.
But yes, I mean, look, good comics are good comics. That's what we're here for, and that's great. I don't trust DC or Marvel, but truly DC, to be in it for the long haul. They're going to start something, and then it's not going to sell the way they'd hoped it would because nothing sells the way you hope it will. And they'll start to futz with it, and then they'll just blow it up and start over.
I mean, that's what happened with the Ultimate Universe.
Absolutely. And that's what will happen with the Absolute Universe unless all of a sudden DC is bought by somebody who never read DC before.
So that's fair. I hope next week we have something else to talk about.
We will.
I'm sure Marvel is not far behind. In their announcements, they're probably pissed that we're talking about this, of course. But I want to get to our guests really soon. But there's something I kind of want to talk about, and I kind of want your opinion. There's a little bit of a power, or not power. You talk about our community, the donut shop that we live in this world of comics, and there's a level of community that people share things with. It's hard. It's a hard business. It's a hard life that everyone's chosen to live, and we need to take care of each other and support each other. So one of the things that people do is they're like, hey, if I find a deal, I'm going to share it with people so that they can take advantage of that deal. And an example of something where the comics community or people, artists and creators and stuff like that can kind of, support small businesses and help them to grow and give them things when they're doing right by people. Is a perfect example of that is a company called Sticker Mule. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the whole controversy at the moment.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So educate me.
I'm going to educate you. I'm going to educate you and the listeners real quick, and then I want your opinion on it. So, Sticker Mule is a place where people get stickers. You have a show, you need to get stickers. It was a company that kind of it was everybody's go-to default sticker company, so they could sell them at shows and stuff like that. I've known for a bit that the ownership is a little too far to the right for my taste, and they've done some stuff. Well, last weekend, I guess Sunday, the owner sent out an email to all customers of Sticker Mule saying, "Hey, we're going to give you some deals, and why don't you help donate to Donald Trump's campaign because he got shot." And
because he got shot, that's the reason why.
Yeah, well, because we need to support him because he's a good. Well, this person is very much on his side.
Yes,
the comics community and creator community responded by sharing this ridiculous email that they all got, saying, "I would never do this. This is crazy. I'm no longer going to use you because you're now injecting politics into my consumption of your product that had nothing to do with politics." So the guy apparently has doubled down and started sharing the emails that he's gotten back with people and doxing the consumers who have gone after him. So now we're in this weird world, and the reason I bring it up is because it kind of intersects with our world. But we're in this larger world where we are, where the politics you keep affects the business that you do, and I don't know that that's good. I don't know that that's bad, and I'd like your opinion on it.
Well, loath as I am to share my opinion,
of course I understand.
But my opinion is, first and foremost, Donald Trump can fry in hell, hopefully, while I'm still alive to watch that. That's just my opening statement.
Okay.
Anybody who wants to support him has every right to do so. Anybody who uses my money to support him is on thin ice. I'm probably not going to give it to you, even if I kind of back what you're doing. Because, as you just pointed out, That's not the purpose. That's not what we're here for. But I acknowledge that in times I might. This whole Hobby Lobby thing has brought about, has put us on the cusp of just completely destroying the United States of America the way we have known it for 280 years. And this is just the next evolution of that. It's like 2 or 3 steps down that same road. You want to raise money for Trump for whatever reason? Fine. You want to spend your profits on Trump? That's fine. I don't boycott Chick-fil-A because of their support for the right-wing causes.
I do.
Oh no, I boycott them for a very specific reason because of their hatred and hostility for people for whom they want money.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, and if you're going to be feeding people, you feed everybody.
Right.
You know, it's.
I mean, I don't eat there. I don't understand. I don't understand how my friends who are gay and in that community continue to support that. It drives me crazy.
Well, I'll tell you a very quick story about that. I was in Lower Manhattan in the village, Greenwich Village, when the Chick-fil-A, the first one in New York City, in Manhattan, opened. And I walked by there by coincidence on my way to Martha Thomas's place because Martha and I were going to go see probably a James Bond movie because that's what we do. We go see James Bond movies together, hopefully other stuff. So I said, well, I'm sorry I'm late, but I had to walk all the way around this block here because of the crowds. And she says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you know, Chick-fil-A opened up like 2-3 blocks away from her. And she says, no, I didn't know that. And I said, well, I didn't either. Otherwise, I would have gone a different route. And she said, well, there was nobody there, was there? Because Martha is very sweet and extremely knowledgeable.
Sure.
Really a human being. But she's an optimist. And she thinks just because she's in Manhattan, it's that, you know, and in the land of the gay community, the headquarters of the gay community, literally, is and Greenwich Village, and has been at least since 1969. And I said, no, actually, they were triple lined. They went around the block 3 times. I'd never seen anything like that before. Sure. I expected, like, the Beatles to stick their heads out and throw chicken at people or something, you know? No. Well, that's as close as I ever got to a Chick-fil-A, I should point out.
Well, I mean, I guess I think we're of the same in mind, and I appreciate that. I wanted to bring it up. I want people to be aware of what's going on. You know, thanks Silas and Robert for chiming in. You know, it's a problem. You know, we live in this world where, you know, I'm wearing a political shirt today for the first time. You know,
hey, what are you wearing? I can't see it. Oh, I like that shirt. I've liked that shirt I like that design since the first time.
So
I'm promoting me.
Well, I love that. See, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But like we live in this world where there's this intersection where, you know, I believe if you're gonna your political affiliations are nobody's business but your own. If you're going to share them, you have to
make it people's business.
If you make it somebody else's business, then you have to suffer the consequences of people not agreeing with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
As long as nobody's getting hurt physically, that's fine.
That's hopeful. Unfortunately, these days, you cannot say that with all certainty.
Yeah, I know that.
I'd like to, but you can't.
we have a special show tonight. We're gonna change topic. We're gonna bring in our guests. Our guests are a couple of really, really great guys, people who are very important to the comic book business, people who've been around for a while. And we got two people on tonight, so we're gonna bring in one first. You get to pick artist or writer first.
Oh, I have artist.
Okay, here we go. Welcome everybody into the show, Tom Fowler. Hey,
hello.
Tom. How are you? Thanks for putting up with our opening segments. And
no, thank you. I was about to chime in. I didn't realize that there would be a little memory lane sting going on.
Yeah, definitely get that. We'll definitely get that. We're gonna bring in Fred, because we want to talk about, first thing I want to talk about is the new project you're working on. So let's get Fred in here. Hang on. I missed him. Here he is. Hey, how are you?
Fred.
Hey, Fred.
I heard of pop-up restaurants and pop-up writers. That makes sense.
Same concept.
So I have to say, I was so excited making these videos. I do this, you guys, I do this whenever I bring somebody in, kind of give them a little memory lane trip. But I was excited because I got to use the same image in both videos.
Pretty efficient.
Yeah, it was very efficient. I loved it. So thanks, you guys, for being here. I want to talk first about your new book that is about to be kickstarted. We're going to put in the chat very soon. You're going to the link to it so you can follow on Kickstarter and get notified when it launches. It's called GAMEMASTERS, the comic book history of role-playing games. So there's already 642 followers for this Kickstarter that hasn't even launched yet.
It hasn't been launched.
Nope. It's in the chat now, folks. Go ahead and make sure you are one of those 642 or more. I'm going to throw this to you, Fred, first, because you've done books like this before. You've done the comic book history of animation, the comic book history of comics, the comic book history of role-playing games. What made you decide to tell this story?
Well, it was actually Tom's idea.
That's even better. I love that.
I had contracted with Random House to do the comic book story of basketball. Like before that, you showed Action Philosophers and comic book history of animation, and Ryan and I've done comic book history of comics, and so I've done a lot of my nonfiction stuff with Ryan Dunleavy.
Right.
And they wanted a more realistic look. Random House did for the comic book story of basketball, which was for 10 Speed Press. And when I think of Tom, and I always hate comparing artists to other artists because they're either I get punched or they're like no. But
yeah, some are homicidal. You got to be careful.
I know, right? I always think of Tom as the latter day Jack Davis, and when I think of comics about basketball, I think of the old Spalding ads.
Yes.
Dr. J that were on the back of DC and Marvel. So I asked Tom.
Yeah.
hey,
And-
Tom. And Tom said,
Tom said no. Tom said I'm 6'5", very much an indoor kid all of my life, and there's a few things in the world I hate more than basketball. And then Fred chimed in with, well, what about baseball? And that would be a close second because I've never been able to hit a ball in my life. So it was like Fred was bringing up all these childhood traumas to do the histories about.
that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and so wound up kind of just saying, well, look, at some point in the future, would you like to do one of these, and what would be a subject you'd like? And at the time, I was very much kind of branded as the D&D guy. So I just kind of said, D&D, something else like that.
And
some point.
unfortunately for Tom, I am very suggestible.
Yeah.
So immediately light bulb went boop, and
Yeah.
I started to work, since frankly I would have preferred to do the role-playing game thing instead of basketball. But basketball book turned out great. Joe Cooper drew it. It's great. Get it at your local bookstore.
Yeah.
Well, I love the Jack Davis approach, because that would be the first thought or the first visual image that would come into my mind. That and football. We don't have a really good hockey artist,
Right.
that I can think of offhand.
Yeah, that was an interesting outfit there, 10 Speed. They were doing a bunch of comic book story books, and actually Alex Irvine and Tom Coker had already done the comic book history of baseball, which would have been my first choice of sports as well. But I pitched them this comic book history of role-playing games, and they were like, no, too niche. And then we pitched them the comic book history of football, and they're like, no, too niche. I'm like, wow.
I don't understand that one.
I'm going to stop pitching you now.
I hate
Good
pitching
luck.
to publishers and this goes back decades, because they don't have a clue. And now as an editor myself, I know nobody has a clue. That's not the point. The point is this a worthwhile shot? It's just that simple. Is it good? Is it worthwhile? Can we promote it? That's it.
So did you take this to Clover?
Yeah, we took a couple other places first.
Okay.
And we got a lot of the same kind of, I don't know, like we had nothing but positive feedback, but there was always like maybe one person along the line that had cold feet about doing one thing or another outside what they normally did.
Or
that's fine.
one
That's
publisher,
publishing.
One publisher, everyone got fired who supported the book. That was a slight
one
problem.
publisher imploded. That was crazy.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Frank McLaughlin and I did a couple of books for one of the tentacles of St. Martin's Press. The first one was how to draw those bad, bodacious babes of comics, and it sold like a son of a bitch. Mark Wheatley did the design work. It was beautiful. Frank, of course, did all the illustrations. Very, very proud of it. Then they brought in an art director who hated comics. And the next book was a very, very difficult project. And when it finally was released, it was released a week after Donald Trump decided not to run for president 12 years ago. And they had just released his latest autobiography, the same publisher, same imprint. And they took more returns, I think, than they printed. If they printed 10 million copies, they got 11 million back. And that hurt our book even more, although given the crappy design work, I wasn't entirely annoyed. So yeah, book publishing, it doesn't make comics look logical because of the fan element. But if you get the fan element, it is logical. Book publishing is not.
Yeah. I mean, what wound up happening was I was talking to Hank about something else at Clover. And I was just kind of pulling things out. And I was like, oh, no, I've got this book with Fred we've been working on in the background forever. You want to do that? And he was like, let's talk about that. And it wound up going from there. I've had a good relationship with Hank since We did Mysterious at Wildstorm, Parker and I,
Sure.
and he's the reason we got the rights back.
Yeah.
So I love Hank to death, and I trust him, which is more than I can say for a lot of people in this industry that I worked with. So it felt like a good fit, and it took a little while, like it would any of those kinds of processes do. But yeah, I think we're both happy. I mean, I'm very happy, and Fred was pushing for a Kickstarter from the beginning, and I've had weird experiences with the one Kickstarter that I did do, and so I wasn't 100% certain that I wanted to do it completely without a safety net. So the idea of having a publisher involved that could kind of push the kinds of things that I just don't have the admin skills to deal with, and be able to say, I would like this, please, sir, and have them talk to the printer about figuring out how to do it, and those kinds of things. I like to feel kind of taken care of. So we kind of got the perfect marriage of that with what we're doing now. So,
and I got to tell you, from my perspective, it was the right choice. I got an email from Clover, like I think on Tuesday. It's like, hey, we're about to launch this thing. Would you be interested in supporting us? Here's this podcast that Tom Fowler did. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll absolutely support it. Here's the link to tonight's show. And they're like, great, we'll support that too. So they're definitely on board, and they're doing a good job for you. So
I worked with some of those guys back when they were over at IDW, Ted, and I enjoyed working with them. I like them. I think they're smart, and that Terry of the Pirates thing that they're doing is just drop dead gorgeous, and everybody just likes to see stories told with little lines on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Should buy all 13 volumes, even though 3 of them have yet to come out.
Well, they make good looking books. That was the other thing. Like we wanted to. I've been from the beginning. I've been pushing a very specific kind of look, and when I kind of presented that to them, they didn't blink. They were like, "Okay, we'll see if we can do that."
And the press releases that we've gotten, I think I've gotten 2, I think, are very nice. I mean, they're very supportive. I for a Kickstarter campaign, for a publisher to go out there before the campaign starts and give everybody a heads up, that requires thought. You actually got to think about the project you're publishing.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, role-playing games in general are huge on Kickstarter, which, as Tom says, is why I thought that this would be a perfect book for Kickstarter. And yeah, everybody wants the Kickstarter to fund within 10 minutes, so they try to get as many, pledges as possible to pump.
I would be far more comfortable if it funded in 10 minutes.
5.
it'll be. You're going to be fine. You guys are going to be great on this. This is good.
I'm not concerned.
Fred, what's your history with role-playing games? I'm curious.
So my parents got me the, and I'm a bit of a cold. You might hear it in my voice, but I'm trying to be 100% tonight. So my parents got me the Dungeons & Dragons basic set, which is not that set. That, I believe, is the Larry Elmo cover.
Right.
I got the Errol Otis cover, which
Right.
was one before that.
Right.
Which is spectacular. And I immediately sort of fell in love with it. And making up stories, bossing around my friends. It's all, something that comes very naturally to me. But then but my problem with Dungeons and Dragons was always, I don't particularly care for the high fantasy genre. But the great news is there's all these other games. There's the DC Heroes role-playing game. Although I played much more. I was much more a Marvel guy. I was a Marvel superheroes guy. That was TSR's second most popular game behind Dungeons and Dragons. I played.
I'm ready for you. I'm ready for you. I am prepared. I got this. How about this?
I'm impressed. I also have visual cues myself, although I'm more analog. I also play Top Secret.
Yeah, I got this. I got this one. These are written by Paul Levitz.
Of course, Legion. I mean, come on.
So I played them all through college. My very first published writing ever was for Steve Jackson Games GURPS system, and they have their own magazine called Pyramid. And the first book I ever published was a supplement for this game, the horror game Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, okay.
I started 11 high school, and now I can't get my players to stop playing it. I'm like, can we do something else? They're like, no. I'm like, all right. Keep going. So I stopped playing role-playing games for about a decade once I really broke into comics because, if you want to stop eating hot dogs, go work in a hot dog factory. So I was kind of like making up stories for fun in my spare time. Let's watch sports, like something that's the opposite of that.
Right.
But then, I hit my midlife crisis. Instead of cheating on my wife, I started a role-playing game group.
I support that.
It seemed like the healthier choice.
Yeah. I'm sure she appreciates it.
I'm sure she did, unless she's cheating on me. But that's a whole other subject.
Yeah, of course.
So that group's still going on. It's been going on for well over a decade at this point. Now I'm in a weekly game. I'm in fact skipping my weekly D&D game to be here to talk about D&D.
Well,
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I owe the original first two manifestations of TSR because they were located in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is a lovely town. And I'm a Chicago boy, so when we started up First Comics and I was looking for new talent, I was trying to figure out, where are these people hiding? Where are the good people who know how to make deadlines hiding? Do they exist? Yes, they do. And they're working over at TSR. And they want to do comics. Hey! So I got a bunch of them, starting with Timothy Truman. So I was really thrilled.
I'm currently running Isle of Dread, which was the X1, which was the module for the expert session. And I did not know Timothy Truman worked for TSR. And then suddenly I turned the page and I was like, hey,
I've seen that guy.
I recognize that signature.
I know what those lines look like.
Yeah.
That was a strange place up in Lake Geneva because it was a 3-story building, but they were never able to fill it. So people would hide on that 3rd floor, on the top floor. Maybe they'd be working or thinking or talking or just goofing off. They had a board game based on the Honeymooners, and the little things that you move, the tokens you move, were all Ralph Cramden in different colors. And I'm guessing the game didn't sell that well because if you went up to the 3rd floor, all you could see snaking around this gigantic floor, it was a huge floor, was the marching Ralph Cramdens. And I think these are people I'm going to want to work with.
They should have stiffed the people who wanted to play Norton.
Yeah, really. Well,
come on, you guys.
I'd work for Alice in a heartbeat.
Right.
Because she's easily the most reasonable and patient human being ever in the media.
So Tom, what you this was kind of your idea. What's your experience, with it?
With gaming?
Yeah.
Well, I started the first time I ever played D&D, and it was the set that you had up on the thing. It was my brother's. It was the night we moved to Ottawa from Timmins when I was 10 years old.
The night you moved to Ottawa, the day.
Yeah,
oh,
it was January 1st, 1985.
There you go.
And I turned 11 5 days later. We played in a friend of the family's den with a couple of other kids, and I think I fell down a well. I did not do well, but I enjoyed it, and he had all the AD&D second edition books and monster manuals and things like that. So I just kind of remember poring over those things, and a little while later, my friends and I started just goofing around with it, and then beyond that, we started playing Top Secret, And after that, I got a hold of the TMNT game.
Okay.
Which was, it just hit all me in all the sweet spots. And this was before the cartoon. This was,
Yeah.
I was exactly the right age for that black and white glut at that time, and everybody had their own, like, I had my own like little comic book thing that I was messing around with as a creative 13-year-old or whatever, called Samurai Mallards. Like it was, like everybody was in. So now I had this little book that I could make up all the weird animal mercenaries I wanted to. I actually sunk one of them. We have at least one panel of the TMNT game in the book, and I sunk one of my characters into it.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. That's what I like to hear.
Well, the great claim to the TMNT game, right, is that was the first real piece of Turtles merchandise. Like, this is when the black and white comic was still coming out, and in fact, it's a little roundabout. The publisher of the game submitted the game to the American distributor of the Robotech cartoon because he wanted the Robotech role-playing game license, and the guy was like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, what's this? And that started the spark that got Turtles on TV and turned them into the multinational,
That's crazy.
Phenomenon they are today. And it all started with the role playing.
The guy who wanted the Robotech license.
That goes back
with the game.
Yeah. And then
goes back to the very roots of comics, where you'd be toiling away at whatever it is that you're doing, and somebody would see it and offer you some money so that they could put that on their label. It's like Skippy Peanut Butter, which to this very day denies the fact that it was based upon Percy Crosby's Skippy newspaper strip, which is legendary for those of us who are interested in that sort of thing. Same thing with Popeye's chicken. So it's kind of weird. You got to keep your eye on it. Luckily, the Turtles guys are really good at that, and they got a guy who can really handle that. So
yeah,
I'm not worried about them.
So several years later, I was looking for work, and a buddy of mine was working in gaming. He had Ramon Perez, who I went to college with.
Sure.
He'd gotten a couple of gigs in role-playing games. And he said, "Why don't you come down to Gen Con with me?" And so we did, and I went down with a portfolio. I came back with about 3 different gigs. I started working for Shadowrun and Deadlands and like a lot of like Weird West stuff, and wound up getting some, oh God, what are they called? Werewolf Wild West. What's the company called?
White Wolf.
White Wolf. Yeah. Sorry. It's been a long week.
All of them.
Yeah. So I started working for just a ton of different gaming companies, and it was a good way. It was always, in my mind, it was always as a way to kind of take a step toward comics. And it was a great kind of proving ground for just getting your chops together as a penciler and an inker, and because it's all camera ready artwork, or at the time at least. So so you had to be able to actually do the job, do the drawing the way that you would need to do to actually get work in comics. So and eventually I started getting work in comics, and I had this much gaming work and this much comic work, and they kind of did this until all I did was comics after that.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love your comics, so please don't stop.
Well,
No, it's fine. But I mean, at that point, I hadn't done any gaming whatsoever since I was 13 years old.
So
it wasn't until I was like 37 I started again.
On behalf of the medium, I thank you for making that choice.
And Mike can speak on behalf of the medium.
Yeah, who's going to stop me?
Right. So we kind of talked about your guys' experience, and kind of I threw some stuff out there. I remember being in 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade. We had lunch in our classroom, and the guys in the class, we all were making characters at lunch, like. And so Fred and I are the same age, so it's that same time, and like that was what we did. Like I was in the nerd classroom, so let's be honest, like my school, like all the smart kids were like in one class, nerd smarts class, whatever you want to call it. Like they separated, like everybody else was like homogeneously just separated out within classrooms, but except for this other level. So like we're all nerds, all playing Dungeons and Dragons. But like one of the things that I kind of was thinking about as I was preparing for this, like one of the things that I think, I don't know, kind of all got our minds set for it was something like this. Like, how much do you think something like the Choose Your Own Adventure stuff had to do with encouraging, tabletop gaming and stuff like that?
Well, it's really interesting because Dungeons and Dragons was 74. I actually have the very first Choose Your Own Adventure over there. I'm not going to bother to try and find it.
That's fine.
Sugarcane Island, which was originally, the series was called The Adventures of You. Anthony picked it up. And then Adventure, the text game, the first real text game, the one with ARPANET, all this stuff came out of the mid-70s. This stuff was all happening at the same time from that same generation. So clearly there was something in the water that I don't quite know. I never understand the demarcations between the various generations. The boomers did. Was it the boomers? Like
boomers kind of
silent generation, right? Which is my parents' generation.
Yeah. So I feel like it wasn't until that early to mid 80s where it really started to take hold.
Yes. This stuff kind of fed each other. The Choose Your Adventure and D&D and text adventures, which were
and even the offshoots like the Ian Livingston.
Yep.
Is it? And I can't remember who his partner were, who did their own
very nerdy broadcast.
Yeah, who did their own offshoots of Choose Your Own Adventure, but they were more structured like a role-playing game. So you actually had a character sheet in the back, and you were rolling dice as you were going through the books and stuff like that. I had those when I was a kid,
And then Lone Wolf was, I think, out of England, and that rule set, I believe, eventually wound up being the Warhammer, the basis for Warhammer, which is another very popular game out of England.
Right. Which is also Ian Livingston. Yeah.
Well, so I have one more thing to show. So this is let's see if I can. So I happened to be in a store yesterday, and I took this picture of a whole bunch of minis in a gaming store that just happens to exist in Ellicott City in Maryland. I took the picture.
War of the Hammers, yeah.
So I took the picture to send it to Will Dennis. So there was that, which he responded to heaven. It's still today, like this thing that you guys are writing about and drawing about and creating this book that's giving a history to something that is alive and flourishing, I think, in 2024 that I don't think any of us would have thought in 1985.
Well, I was mentioning before we started, I have a 16-year-old. That 16-year-old is also in the nerd class, but half the school. His high school is basically half the nerd class. He's in a gifted program in like the gift. It's a school called Bell High School in Ottawa.
Sure.
But it's basically his grade 9 shop class. They shot rockets. They designed and shot rockets that had to detonate at detonate to come apart at a specific altitude and come back in the field on a parachute. And if you caught it, you got like extra kind of whatever. And the funny thing was, it was very kind of unofficially official because their sports field is right next to the highway, and like one of the major highways out of Ottawa. And so there was a lot of like, don't tell anybody, but we're totally going to do this. And it was really great. But the thing is, like, you look across like high school boards, at least across Ottawa. I know it's the same anywhere else. The D&D club is a huge deal at most schools. His friend's high school has something like his best friend, who he's been playing D&D with since they were both 4, is the president of the D&D club at another high school, and they have like 64 members. They have like 6 different campaigns going at any one time. My son has been in the same campaign every Sunday for the last 6 years, and he's just started another one with another one of his friends, which is going to be happening during the week during the summer, where they're playing like space pirates. And I'm so proud of my son. I talked about this the other night on another podcast, but I'm just so proud of him because his character is basically an arrogant rich son of a bitch who is a brain in a jar in a mech suit, and he drives the spaceship. It's his spaceship. He's the captain because it belongs to him. But he's also just a rich person, so he's an arrogant son of a bitch who just thinks he's smart because he's rich, and all of his decisions are correct because he's rich.
Right. I don't know anybody like that. Never heard of anybody.
Yeah,
like that.
no, not at all. And he's basically playing Boris Johnson in a jar, right? And he was telling me that, like, everybody's got their little quarters, but on the spaceship, he's got a mansion that's his quarters kind of thing. And he gets around through, like, the brain flies through not pneumatic tubes. I don't know what the term is when they're full of fluid. I'm sorry, Graham. But he flies through those to different rooms, but he also has a room of just different jars. So if they go down to a cowboy planet, he's got like a jar with a cowboy hat on it. If he needs to be in disguise, he's got a jar with like a nose and a mustache and glasses. It's just all this
That's
stuff.
fantastic. That's fantastic.
Just threw off the top of his head. I'm just like, you are a genius. I love this. But like it's incredibly popular, and there's so many people doing it. It's not just D&D. It's whatever, and they're all like home brewing their own rules, which is also incredibly fun to see. Like he's been trying to put together his own system, like from the ground up, for a number of years now.
One of the amusing things I experienced with rich people who are into role playing happened in Lake Geneva at TSR. When I would look out the window from their conference room, and there's a big open meadow, and in the middle of the big open meadow was some asphalt, and on the asphalt was a helicopter landing pad, which is not something that one is used to seeing pretty much anywhere in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And I asked what that was about, and they said, we don't use that anymore. I said, well, that explains why you don't have a helicopter there. Why did you build that? I said, well, Gary Gygax built it. It was for him. Did he
have a helicopter?
Evidently, and I guess when he sold the company, he took it with him, or it flew out, which would be, that's the way I want to go. Man, yeah. Next time I quit a job, I want to
take my helicopter with me.
Is it like the last chopper out of Saigon with a bunch of like orcs hanging on to the
flipping the bird and climb into your helicopter?
See, when you said they had like a field and outside there were what you would see, I genuinely thought you were going to say like a bunch of people dressed like horses.
Yeah.
That's how I know rich people to do role play.
Knights hitting each other with foam swords.
That
lots
wouldn't
of
surprise
leather
me.
horses and ponies and such.
So I want to come back to like what's in the book. Like what do you guys? How did you approach what you want to tell in this book? There's so much. We could keep pulling things out of our head for hours. How did you decide what it is you guys want to talk about in this story?
Well, what's super fun about this book is it's really the history of an idea,
okay,
and how it evolved across literally centuries. Like D&D basically has its basis in wargaming, and wargaming stretch back many thousands of years. But the most popular really the most popular game in history is chess, right? So we start with chess and kind of go from there, which started, we're not 100% sure, but the earliest form we found is in the 6th century India and the Gupta Empire. and how that was developed. And then we go from there to, the Baghdad Caliphate. The Napoleon was a huge chestnut. The Napoleonic Wars inspired the Prussian war game, which is really where all this stuff comes from. And for the most part, wargaming was centralized in the actual militaries, right? They use it as actual training. But
Sure.
It wasn't until the mid-50s where a company called Avalon Hill did something very interesting. Basically, they did a crude Kriegspiel war game in German called Tactics. And that kind of sold okay. That was their first game. And then, because the guy who was founded Avalon Hill was about to be deployed to Korea. So he was like, he was nervous about it. Let me, stage some battles here. But then what they did, which was very interesting, which is he took his war game rules, and then applied them to historical battle. He came up with a game called Gettysburg that lets you refight Gettysburg. One of you plays the South, one of you plays the North. And this was hugely successful and spawned an entire, subgenre of games. Really what Gettysburg is it's the introduction of time travel. It's the introduction of fantasy, right? Alternate history. Well, maybe the South could win, I'm glad they didn't, but what if they did, and ultimately
They're still working on that.
Yes. All success and failure are temporary. But what ended up happening was, both Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, the co-creators of Dungeons & Dragons, their introduction into gaming as a hobby was Gettysburg, that literal board game. And so that kind of set them on the path, for at first with the miniatures, right? Like what Warhammer is. Warhammer's not technically a role-playing game, although there is a role-playing game of Warhammer. But what ended up happening was Gygax created miniatures rules for medieval settings called chainmail. Up until that point, the primary genre of miniatures gaming was the Napoleonic Wars. And but Gygax was worried that his book was too short, so he was a big fan of comic books. He specifically mentions EC Comics in the Dungeon Masters Guide, which I thought was interesting because I don't see any evidence of that in the actual game. But there's a lot of Doctor Strange in there, a lot of other comics. In fact, the illustration of Dungeons and Dragons was a Dan Adkins panel. Somebody just swiped from an issue of Strange Tales, what's hilarious to me is back in those days, that's when Strange Tales, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Doctor Strange shared Strange Tales books. Half of the original illustrations of Dungeons and Dragons are, guys on horseback and wizards casting spells that come from the Doctor Strange half. But then they also swiped a bunch of panels from the Nick Fury half. They just took out Nick Fury's pistol and put his sword.
Whose art was that? On
I think in Fury it was Steranko. Pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna swipe,
right. This was it was Strange Tales 167, which I believe was published in 1968, and Dungeons and Dragons was published in 1974. So that comic sat on someone's shelf for a while before they took it down and started copying.
Those were memorable comic books.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
I have some nostalgia for comics that I hold on to because it's important that we hold on to everything that inspired us in comics if you're going to work in comics. So I have that in a little box somewhere, and those Marvel twofers,
right,
with the 12-page stories, 12-page stories, even when they brought it back temporarily in the 70s, I loved them. I loved them. And great artwork. I mean, Kirby and Steranko and, Gene Colan and Marie Severin. That was great.
My favorite sword and sorcery comic from that era is Cull.
Of course.
Yeah.
And Marie was penciling, and her brother, John, inked her.
Yes, that is my favorite as well for that very reason. I mean, I'm not dissing Roy here, but you got the Severin twins drawing to the foot.
Were they twins?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Not at all.
All right.
I believe Marie was considerably younger, if I remember correctly.
That was my.
She seemed considerably younger, but I'd only met John briefly, and Marie I'd met a few times. Wonderful, just a great woman.
Fantastic, both of them fantastic artists.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
sorry.
Well, I just want to kind of get you back on. So, like, we're how far are we? Did you come forward?
Yesterday, basically. I mean, you know, so just very quickly, Gygax, when he does this miniatures rules from the medieval stuff, which is very unusual, he put in a bunch of rules so you could fight the battles in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Right. This inspires Arneson to come up with a game that's a continuing campaign. And what separates role-playing games from all other games, really, it's not the 20-sided dice, it's not the wizards, it's experience points. It's the fact you're leveling up your character, and that's the endorphin hit, right? You get more powerful as you go along. And you mentioned Conan, Mike. That is very much inspired by Conan, which was a huge inspiration to Arneson, because Conan, as we all know, starts out as a lowly thief, right? And ends up being the king of Aquilonia, you know? So what Arneson was trying to do was kind of simulate that fictively in a game sense. And really, Conan, in a couple of stories like Red Nails, some of the more famous ones, goes underground into what we would call a dungeon, right? Goes looking for treasure and adventure and monsters and everything else. And so, so we, that's like the first couple chapters. And then right now, Tom is drawing the current millennium, right? After, you know, TSR goes out of business and is bought by a company called Wizards of the Coast that has created a completely new form of game called collectible card game. And then they themselves, partially because they had the Pokemon license, right? And so the Pokemon thing was
that was a game changer.
Yeah, it was huge, and Nintendo wised up, and like when the license ran out, they were like, "Nope, we're taking that
That's
back."
mine. Thank you very much.
And so that's
kind of like Star Wars and Marvel.
Well,
there was a comic book store. There was a comic book store here in Norwalk, Connecticut. Not there anymore. That was not far from the New Canaan border. New Canaan is a wealthy town. And every couple of days, this limo would come up to the store. My daughter worked it. My best friend owned it. This chauffeur would come out of the limo, come up to the comic book store, and just buy all the new Pokemon stuff that was really, he wouldn't know. We could have given him, I say we, I didn't own the store, but he could have been given anything. It didn't matter. And he just peeled off a few $100s and jumped back into the limo and went back up to New Canaan, where he lived like a block away from Ralph Bakshi, which was even weirder because Ralph was a customer. So I've always been very impressed by the type of people who made those little cards work. I was completely wrong. I don't think I've ever been more wrong about anything in my life. On my honeymoon, when we were up in British Columbia, and we stopped off to see Mike Grell in the Seattle suburbs, and Mike's assistant, Brian Snowdy, was doing this teensy little painting with tiny little brush. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, it was really complicated and detailed and beautiful. And I said, well, what's this? And he says, he's explaining to me what magic is all about. And of course, we never had anything like that before. So this was a very new experience for me. And I said, how many of these paintings are there? How many of these drawings? He said, well, one for each card. There's a billion cards. There'll be a billion more someday soon. And I said, boy, I just, and people collect the cards and they go, yeah. I said, I have a hard time seeing that one working. Well, in point of fact, it probably saved quite a few comic book stores and therefore contributed to our living. So I was way off.
That was when all of that was going on. That's when I was getting my start as an illustrator in gaming. And the actual rates that Wizards of the Coast were paying for those paintings were at the time incredible, because it was about $1,000 a card in $1995.
What's the size?
About it was about 9 by 12 at the most.
Okay.
I don't think I ever worked any larger than that, but I mean,
But you
I'm
can
sure
work up to 9 by
I'm sure
12.
some people were working like huge, but it
But
depends on the artist.
Brian was
really.
working same size,
Well, that's
repro
insanity.
size, and that's what I thought too.
That makes no sense to me.
But insane comics artists, I'm familiar with the species.
Yeah.
But Jack Cole did Plastic Man in the 40s, same size. And
I don't get
deeply impressed because the original art in those days was twice up. It wasn't one and a half, And he said, no, I'll do it the same size. And then 100 years later, there's Brian Snowdy doing these literally $1,000 a shot paintings that big, because that's the size he wanted to do it. And they were fine with that. Aspect ratio is right. Go nuts.
Yeah, that was everybody's kind of white whale, was to land some magic cards.
Sure.
I was doing other cards.
Go ahead. No, Fred.
Well, I'd say there's also a parallel with the Ragnarok of the distribution disaster that comics went through in the late 90s. There was also a massive glut of cards contributing to a lot of store closing, in the late 90s, with a lot of the, superhero cards.
Oh, the superhero cards.
And just every role-playing game had to have a collectible card game, and of those, really only Magic and maybe Yu-Gi-Oh, which is another Japanese import, and Pokemon really survived. I mean, do people still play Pokemon cards?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
But
everybody plays everybody plays digitally, but like they.
I see. Well, they right, yeah.
Pokemon is bigger than ever. It's all over the map.
Yeah, little. The actual card game itself is mostly for younger kids,
right?
And they all still play it.
Yeah.
But then they kind of graduate to the computer game and to the video game and all that. So
it really is the perfect, distillation of the collecting hobby addiction, right? Because you're not only getting people for the cards and the individual cards, they also get to prove to their friends how much better they are than them.
Well, honestly,
with their decks,
as much as anything else, though, again, having lived through all this as a parent, there's also stats. I mean, it's like any kid with a baseball card. There's like a million stats of this, that, and the other thing, and half them, it tends to also become kind of a creative outlet, because my kid included, a lot of these kids are building their own environments. They're making their own Pokemon. There are websites that, like official websites, that enable you to do that kind of thing, or they just go off on their own. And there are a few subjects that I know that if I want to drive my wife nuts, I'll just kind of peek my head through the door and say, Pokemon, dinosaurs, whatever. And my son will just go off, and it'll last for hours and hours. I was working on a book that had dinosaurs in it, and I needed to know what the biggest dinosaur was, because there was one of the first scene was characters running through the rib cage of some colossal dinosaur, and I think it was either at Easter or Thanksgiving or something. I texted my son, because he and his mom were at a dinner, and I was working. I texted him, "What's the biggest dinosaur?" And apparently at the table, like he got back to me right away, Gigantosaurus or wherever it was. But the next hour and a half at the dinner table, just dinosaurs.
Right.
A lot of the people who are comics writers and comics editors and comics artists in the late 70s, early 80s were closet paleontologists.
Oh, yeah.
And I can give you a long list. I mean, I like dinosaurs. You know, I still weep over the loss of Sinclair Oil, although it's coming back. You know, I love dinosaurs, but it's like, so you're in comics, and this was before we became legitimate. So everybody thinks that you're a nerd at best. The best you can be is a nerd. So your closeted hobby is dinosaurs.
Well, listen,
That was weird.
Walter's the perfect example of that.
Yes. Well, Walter, yes, but he's
not so closeted about it.
No, he's his signature. But Walter, you know, studied, you know, geology. He was like a geologist. And I don't know what that has to do with dinosaurs. I guess maybe you'll just
well, that's
crack
where you find them.
Dinosaurs will come out.
You find them in rocks. You study rocks. There you go. No,
the greatest... this is what I was referencing.
Sugarcane Island.
Choose your own adventure.
It is Edward Packard. He's the guy. Yeah. He's the guy who wrote all of them.
The Adventures of You. Never caught on until Phantom picked it up.
Yeah.
That really sounds like a puberty book, though.
It does. It does.
I don't. Yeah.
The growths of you. The growths on you. Well, and then last year, just to bring the story full circle, last year, you know, Magic the Gathering became Hasbro's first $1 billion IP. And this is a company that, don't forget, owns Transformers, G.I. Joe, and God knows what else, you know.
Right.
And that's owned by the Wizards of the Coast division, which also owns Dungeons and Dragons and Hasbro. And a big chunk, you asked where we end up, a big chunk of the last part of the book is talking about how it's tough for big corporations to monetize role-playing games.
Which is life-affirming in and of itself.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm good with that, to be honest with you.
Here's a small piece of trivia, which means it's really minuscule. The guy who ran Warner Publishing when DC Comics was part of Warner Publishing, Bill Sarnoff, wonderful human being. Loved him to death.
I think that's the only person who you said who you've ever said that about who worked for actually Warner Publishing.
He may be the only person who ever works for Warner Publishing. Anyway, when Warner Publishing went away with the Time merger, first of many, he was hired by Hasbro to run the joint, and he took all the stuff that he learned. He was also publisher, well, not publisher, but the executive behind Mad Magazine. And
what year was this thereabouts? Is that curiosity?
Well, I was working there in the 70s. This would be the mid
76 to 78.
Okay.
Yeah, but also for another 10 years.
So beyond.
Before the time merger happened. He was there for another 10, 12 years. Last thing he did, I remember, was gave a wonderful eulogy at one of the best party events I'd ever been to in my life. A 3.5 hour memorial for William Gaines.
Oh.
And I sat behind Howard Cosell and his toupee. And that's how I recognized Howard Cosell. It's like, who's this guy with this really horrible toupee? Oh, it's Howard Cosell. Anyway, Sarnoff used a lot of the moves he had learned from DC and from Mad to bring Hasbro into the 20th century or 21st century or whatever it was that day. And I respected that. This is a good businessman who understood this stuff and understood what to take from this stuff and use it for that stuff. That's a creative businessman.
I want to follow back on what you said. You know, that you said you're finding that large corporations are having a difficult time monetizing role-playing games, and I said I don't have a problem with that. I'm glad that you guys have had to find a way. Hopefully, we'll find a way to monetize role-playing games so that we can get this Kickstarter funded as soon. 5 minutes. We'll go for 4 minutes. It'll be fine.
Probably the most popular comic book in North America.
You are.
What was the Archie thing phrase? What was that? Was the strangest?
Oh, it's the it is It is America's comic. Oh yeah, so we gotta
North
come
of
back
this,
to
Game Masters is north of. We're no offense, Archie. You sit over there in the corner. We're gonna take the whole comic.
it is the
We're going to take the
official
hemisphere.
official
The
comic book
Western
of the
hemisphere.
USA.
That's right.
Are you okay with that, Tom? Like we need your opinion on this.
Well, you know, in the here's the thing. Like in Canada, we have split run magazines and things like that. So in Canada, he's called Gordy. And
Is he really?
Yeah, he's with the Mackenzie sisters, and they're never
Sure.
quite get
Excellent.
along.
Excellent.
I mean, so it's fine. The version we have is just beavers and loonies and things, so it's good.
Half his dialogue has
We're
to be in
fine.
French by law.
Yeah. Well, only in Quebec and New Brunswick.
Have you been to Windsor lately?
Windsor?
Yeah, because
Good Christ, no.
no, it's a horrible town, but it's one of the two towns in all of Canada that I don't.
Who doesn't love going to Detroit in the summer?
Well, that's a good point. But I would do that to drive down the Gordie Howe Bridge because I think that is stupidly cool.
Well, I want to. So we do need to acknowledge that that Tom is actually coming to us from another country, and I think you are the second person to be in Canada on the show.
Well, that's just racist.
I'm just saying.
And
You're the first male to be, so we can be sexist too. You're the first man in Canada to be on the show.
Oh, who else did you have?
I think Cecil was at her parents' house.
Oh, okay.
So
well, given that we're just a couple of months away from
there you go. See, that's how it works. If you're Canadian, you have to be at your parents' house.
You have to. It's the law. You have to broadcast from your parents' house.
That's true.
Gravity is patchy up here. You know, maple syrup has been monetized. It's kind of like a Bitcoin thing, but it's liquid. You know, it's strange. We got our own groundhogs. It's crazy.
I have loved Canada all my life. I was 13 when I first was up there.
That's a filthy lie, but go on.
And I still love the nation, but I know that in a couple of months I'm going to start being jealous. So hang in there, guys.
Don't be too jealous. We're going to go fascist in about 5 months. So
There's nowhere to run, folks.
yeah.
We're bringing the party down.
Yeah. Well, let's turn this into turn this around to comics. So you guys are doing this book. You are making the comic book history of role-playing games, which I think is fantastic. And again, if you haven't noticed, it's in the link of wherever you're watching this. Make sure you like and follow and subscribe to the show. But the link's there, so go ahead and get on there. But what is I like kind of throw this at both of you, and it's not how I like to do things, but I'm gonna do it anyway. You know, what is it that attracts you to the comics medium? I mean, both of you are talented, creative people who could do what you do in different mediums other than comics. Why comics?
Fred.
Oh. I've talked.
Honestly, it's the only thing I've ever been good at. It was the thing when I was very, very small. I mean, I've always drawn. I always wanted to be a cartoonist. Originally, it was newspaper strips. There's something about telling stories with pictures just always appealed to me. And, you know, my grounding is different than I think a lot of other people who are working in North American comics, simply because I wasn't allowed to read them when I was a kid. So what I was reading was things like bande dessinée and British, like Punch magazine, British, you know, things like Arthur Searle and Thelwell and Raymond Briggs. And you know, Mad Magazine I was allowed to get, so that's where your Jack Kirby's, not Jack Kirby's, your Jack Davis's and things come in. And it really wasn't until maybe I was 7 years old. We had dinner at a friend's place who'd been a teacher, and she pulled out a box of comic books to keep my brother and I entertained. My parents made a face. And she went up one side of them and down the other. because of the value of comics as a way for kids to learn to read, and et cetera, et cetera. And it was great. So when we got back home to Timmins, my dad hit every garage sale, and I was introduced to North American comics, other than what was in that box.
Oh, that's awesome.
So a lot of like the original Marvel Star Wars books, a lot of Gold Key, funny animal stuff. But at the same time, I was still reading Asterix and Tintin and whatever. So it all got glommed together. And the other thing too is I was in the French immersion program when I was a kid. And when you're in elementary school, you have library period where you have to go, and every 2 weeks you have to go and you have to take a book out from the school library. Well, in French immersion, you have to take out a French book and an English book. And the great thing about French libraries is they're full of comic books. So,
Right.
there was, again, like just another endless supply of bande dessinée and like a different, and it's still, comics are comics. I don't care where they're from or what they're called. They're, they have little, there are little distinctions between formats and styles and things like that. But at the end of the day, they're all doing the same thing. So it being able to access so many different kind of fields that all tangentially kind of tied together as the thing that, I was in the middle of all of that. It always felt like, oh, I could do anything with these.
Yes, you can.
And whereas I think a lot of other people maybe just saw I could do superheroes with it. Like, it never really bothered me. Like, I wanted to work for Marvel and DC because that's where the money was. But it didn't, I think I can count on one hand the times I've drawn superheroes in a 25-year career, right? So the idea of being able to tell whatever kind of story I want to tell, or being able to live in whichever world I wanted to live in, and be able to tell all kinds of different stories. That's what comics were for me. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, like if I'd grown up in a more filmic community, I may have gone into filmmaking, but comics was a way to do all of that, but by yourself. So, and
Cool.
as a pale, friendless nerd, that was a real value.
Yeah, it's important.
The French comic books that I saw, graphic novels we'd call them today, that I saw in Montreal in the end of 1973, January 1st, 74, led to the creation of First Comic. Because I was at this, I've told this story before, so Bob, you can just take a nap.
I was waiting for the story.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. What happened was
like chapter 1 of the Mike Gold story. So just
no, hell no. That's a good 10 years down the road. Anyway, I was flipping through these books there was a rack full of French comics.
Yeah.
At Woolworths. Remember Woolworths? Still there. Up there. And I'm looking at this stuff. It's 1973, and I'm thinking, why can't we do this? Why do the French get to do this? Why can't we do this? We should do this. This is wonderful. I could tell I had a good idea what the stories were. I mean, a good comic, you should be able to get a sense at least of the story without reading it. Didn't know French, still don't. But that was the day I decided I'm going to work towards bringing the American comic book medium up to speed, up to the rest of the world. I mean, one can argue that we invented it. One can also argue that a bunch of cavemen invented it. That's fine too. I don't care. We could do better, and we have. So I'm very happy with that. But it all started in Montreal.
So many things to do.
that's awesome. It's a great story. It's always a great story. Fred, so how'd you end up here?
So I was always a huge comics nut, along with being a big D&D nut. But I grew up in a very small town in Ohio where it just seemed inconceivable to me. I didn't understand how people made comics, right? So it was time to go to college, I went to college for film at Syracuse. But as it turned out, I hated making movies, which took me a year or two to realize, I'm miserable. And you might as well have said, you don't like orgasms. It didn't make any sense to me, why did I not like movies? But I didn't like standing around fucking with the actors and hanging the lights and waiting for the light and lugging equipment. I have a feeling that if I had gone to college a few years later and had access to the digital tools that folks have now, probably a totally different story. I was all thumbs, intimidated by technology, just a mess. However, I was in the comics club, which ironically, the Syracuse comics club had been founded by a guy who had gone to my high school in Nowhere, Ohio. And so I joined it, and I met a bunch of people there who were studying to be illustrators, and they were all comics nuts too. And one of those people was Ryan Dunleavy, who I did Action Philosophers with at Comic Book History Comics. And another person I met there was Steve Ellis, who I did my very first comics, The Silencers, with. Steve went on to, he's actually primarily now known as an RPG painter and painter of magic cards. So he still does comics from time to time, but mostly he's known for RPG stuff. And so I started writing for them, and we basically all got along great, and we moved to New York City to break in the comic industry. And Steve was already getting published Steve was drawing Iron Man while he was still an undergraduate. That's how in demand he was. So of course we all started to break into comics, or try to break into comics between 1996 to 1998, right? Which is the perfect time if you know your comics history.
Oh, sure. Right, exactly.
9 years later, I got my first Marvel gig, and they haven't been able to get rid of me since. Comics, Marvel got rid of me a long time ago.
Well, that's unfortunate.
They left me alive. Their first mistake.
Do you two guys think that your experience with an enthusiasm for role-playing games gave you a leg up in comics? Were you able to use that stuff? Those influences?
Maybe I've had this thing that I've been that's been going through my head, and this is possibly tangential to this, but I've had this thing that's been going around with my head since I've started doing interviews specifically for this book. The reason that I started playing, I'll do the very simple version of this, but the reason I started playing again was I hit a wall creatively because I had started to hate to draw, and this was around 2014 or so. And I hated to draw. This had been building up for a couple of years before that. And I was going through a terrible depression. This was before I'd been diagnosed with anything or whatever. And my wife suggested, hey, look, we have friends who play D&D. You've mentioned you want to go play D&D. Just go. And I did, and it kind of, what I wound up doing was taking time for myself, which I hadn't done in forever, but also I started drawing for myself while we were playing. And that became like a little personal project called D&D. And there's a Tumblr for that. And that was the last Kickstarter that I did back in 2014 or 2015, around the same time. And they were just drawings that I did for myself the same way I did when I was a kid, to make myself feel safe, but it was for me. It wasn't for anybody else. I wasn't doing creative admin for some other job I was working on. I was taking time, I was carving it out, and it was for me. And that got me out of it. And I've learned since that what I needed was to, every time you see me hashtagging something with TV doodles, that's what I'm doing now. I'm sitting down while we're having family time in front of the TV or whatever, and I'm just drawing whatever the hell I want to draw, not for anybody else, just for me, to recover that kind of sense of play, that sense of safety that I had when I was a kid. I think now I'd always associated me coming out of that murk with with learning to take that time for myself, and kind of jumbling it up with gaming. I think what role-playing games gives people, in a larger sense, and I think this is part of what helped me in all of this, is that as a parent, you're always being told by teachers about the value of creative play. for childhood development, things like that.
Right.
I don't think that goes away. I think that's something that people still need all the way through their lives. And
Absolutely.
whether that's, you know, a fantasy football league, whether that's, you know, mashing orcs into pink dust on graph paper, whether that's your Warhammer league, whether that's, you know, I don't care what it is. Like everybody, whether that's me sitting down and drawing like I did when I was a kid, that's creative play. And I think that's the important thing. And I think if you're lucky enough to kind of have imprinted on that kind of dynamic when you were a kid, and still be able to kind of bring it forward, I think that helps if you're in a creative industry, because you know how to play creatively.
Right.
You know? I think that answers your question in a way, but it's this thing that
it's great.
that's just been like banging around my head for about a month or two now, since I had to start answering interview questions about, you know, why is there a resurgence of role-playing games, or why, you know, how this, that, or the other thing. But I think it's something like, I found my thing, which was drawing for me, but it was also, you know, bashing monsters. But it was all about the idea of, okay, it is a way to play in a way that is creatively satisfying, whether that's with the group or with myself, or, well, that didn't sound right, but as I'm drawing, except, yeah, I mean, you gotta get hand puppets, and then but anyway, it was an important kind of barrier to break through, to realize that I think that's an important part of any kind of creativity. And I think if you've got that baked in from an early age, it can only help, you know, as you move forward in any creative industry. Frederick.
Thanks, Tom. You know, I think I totally agree with what Tom said. I would actually make it a little bit more abstract, just from the writing standpoint. Like, when I first started my midlife crisis gaming group, I would only do other people's adventures. I would never write my own adventures. I would do pre-published adventures somebody else wrote, and I would always tweak them, do my little spins on them. But for the most part, I was like, you're not putting any effort into this yourself. Save that for the paid stuff. But as I, you know, particularly during like the COVID lockdown, which I think inspired, you know, a lot of what we're talking about now in terms of the resurgence of roll-top games, ironically over Zoom, and even though we weren't physically in each other's presences, I did start creating my own games, and I have a bunch of creator-owned comics that coming out. One was announced this week that are either entirely or semi based on my role-playing game campaigns that my friends and I did. So it's very cool.
Yeah. What there was a book that was just, what is that book? I saw that yesterday, day before.
Yeah, it's called Murder Kingdom. It's coming out in October from Mad Cave. It's an amusement park slasher at a certain fairy tale themed amusement park in Florida, where somebody is killing the employees based on the gruesome manner of the original Grimm's fairy tale. It's fun stuff. Chris Pondas did the fantastic art, and Paula Gallen-Show did the art of the covers, which is fantastic. She's great. She's fantastic.
Yeah,
you guys both put your finger exactly on what makes comics unique and wonderful, is that you can take yourself and put it in your work. And when yourself changes or evolves, or you get new ideas, you can do that too.
Yep.
Without having to shift gears and turn around and go back to where you came from and start over. No, it's comics. We can do this. We can do this. The best piece of advice I ever got in my life, and I'm going to share that with you, came from Maggie Thompson shortly after my wife died, because her husband had died a couple of years before that. And we were talking, and Maggie said, just don't forget to dream. Now, I think Maggie is one of the most intelligent human beings ever to walk the earth, but that was a stunner. I've lived with that as part of me ever since. Don't forget to dream.
Sometimes those dreams and nightmares, like Murder Kingdom, on sale in October.
That's right.
Reserve it now, kids.
Could you pull that back so I can see the whole cover?
Um,
No, you can't. Okay. Oh, okay. That's very nice. I mean, it's
Paulina's a genius.
very pretty, but who's the artist, and who? I assume the artist was the colorist.
Yes, she is. Her name is Paulina Ganesho. She's fantastic. She's currently
she's doing another book. She has another book that just came out.
Powerpuff Girls.
She's doing Powerpuff Girls with Kelly Thompson.
With Kelly Thompson, yeah, for Dynamite.
Oh,
and yeah, he's a genius. This guy's good too. Trevor Henderson, I think his name is. But yeah, no, Paulina's doing the main covers. And wait until the second one. It's the map of the park with like a knife through it and blood everywhere. It's great. It's just like I'm having fun, recreating with fairy tale characters all the like 80s slasher movie PR rental sleeves my parents never let me rent. So a lot of that going on.
Yeah,
cool.
That's the great
Very,
thing
very cool.
about our little donut shop. We're really sick people, and now we've monetized it.
I mean, if you're good at something, don't do it for free. I heard that in the comic book movie.
That is true. That is true. I want to kind of touch on one other thing with you guys because I thought it was kind of interesting. And we, from the beginning, you guys, like I said, I was able to use the same cover to in your videos because you guys have worked together before, and you obviously
you missed one of them. You didn't put our whole.
No, I know there was others. There was a lot. Like there was a decent amount, right? And what I enjoyed, because what I enjoyed is that like, oh, there's a Tom Fowler variant cover on a Fred Valenti cover on a Fred Valenti story, and so like a lot of that, and it was a lot of good stuff. But when you guys have a history of working both, and not only just the two of you work together, but both of you have experiences working with other creators consistently. Tom, you worked with Kat for a bunch. You worked with Judd a couple of times. When you're working with creative partner that you have experience with, is that something you look for actively, and how does that improve the experience for you guys?
It depends on the person. There are a few people that I've worked with once, but
okay.
Kat was fantastic. I'd work with her again. Parker, Parker and my doors are always open to each other.
Sure.
James Asmus was the same thing. It's just you kind of on any job everybody kind of finds their levels, and you learn who you can work with and who you can't. Like there are some people that you vibe with or you don't for one reason or another. And most of the writers that I've I think done well with are the ones that kind of treat it like a team effort. I've certainly worked with writers that think less so. And for me any creative process, it's a conversation, right? So you write, the script gets written, layouts get made, notes get made, conversations happen. What if we did it this way? What if we do it that way? Well, we need to do it this way because of this happening later on, kind of thing. But that's, if everybody's communicating, then that's how it works. And Fred and I get very angry at each other sometimes, but we also know that both of us are passionate about what we're doing. And we know that we each want what's best, and neither of us have so much of an ego about it that we're like, my way, it must be. It's always like, okay, that makes sense, for whatever. And I have the same relationship with Parker. I have the same relationship with Asmus. I don't know. I'm struggling to say the same thing over and over again, but it's just I think
Sure,
we just get along and everybody knows they're part of a team. That's the only thing that I ever really care about.
And the book
right?
was
So-
Tom's idea in the first place, so it's not
Yeah.
like, you know, like,
Right. Well, I mean, but again, you also have worked with certain people a few times, and
Yeah.
How do you what do you? Oh, you also do a lot of work that's work for hire stuff where you maybe don't get those choices, but when you have the opportunities, that's something you actively seek out?
Well, that's why it's kind of precious, when I do get the chance to work with someone like Tom, who I am good friends with, and we've hung out socially outside of work, and we're on the same vibe. It's delightful because a lot of times you don't get to make these decisions on work for hire projects because, the grind of monthly comics, we all know what it is. The script tends to go whoever happens to be standing around at the time and needs to be fed a job, and a lot of times that makes magic. A lot of times you just get, peanut butter and dog shit, it just does not go well together.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't go well. But sometimes you produce magic and you don't know it until later.
Sure. Yep.
And that is such a wonderful feeling. It's like, whoa, hell, I thought that sucked. Wait a moment. That's a great feeling.
Yeah, no, it is great. And I think Tom and I got shoved together on Hulk, right? Wasn't that the first thing we did? That's how I met you in the first place?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I was struggling to remember what the first thing we did was. While I was like, I'm sure we did something before that.
This season one line Marvel did back in the day that was a bunch of their characters. They decided to have standalone hardcover origin stories, and we got assigned Hulk.
But that's the thing too. And the other thing too is like if sometimes you wind up mashed together with somebody that you don't get along with, or that things don't gel, and regardless of what the finished product is, it might be the greatest comic ever written or ever drawn or ever created. You don't want to go back and work with that person again. You know what I mean? Like, life is too short. So I will take being a jobber over being a miserable A-lister.
This conversation needs to get. If we continue this conversation much longer, we need to get off the air.
Well, I'm not naming any names, but I'm just saying
fine.
that,
I mean, I could, but
there are benefits to actually doing something you believe in with people who believe in the same thing.
Right,
and it's often, I know I'm the youngest person on this call. I just turned 50. And I'm more and more, I'm quite happy to take the path of least resistance for a lot of things, and I'd much rather enjoy the actual work than necessarily be in the Wizard top 10. And
these days,
if I could do both, I'd be happy. But
and not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just rare for me to be able to actually have a conversation in English, the one language I sort of understand. With the artist, and I work with fantastic people from Brazil and Italy and Spain and France and all around the world, but it can be challenging, particularly when you work with
especially if you're trying to do something that is initially creative. Like, that could be something that I could see where it'd be like if it's your idea as opposed to something that already has like a lexicon and a whole bibliography of what this is supposed to look like, but being able to have that conversation in a language that you guys can both. I think that I get how that could be.
Well, and you get a lot of people, obviously Canada and America aren't one-on-one, but what I struggle with a lot is a lot of times, the overseas artists, their knowledge of America comes exclusively from like Hollywood movies. And so it's like their perception and versus the reality that I'm trying to get across can be a little challenging.
Okay.
But you roll with it. And like Mike said, a lot of times it's just alchemy and it just works. Most of the time, I should say. It's fantastic. And then sometimes, you're doing a story set on an alien world with monsters and whatever. So it doesn't matter.
There's two reasons to be a freelancer. And all of us have made that decision. The first is because you want to get the opportunity eventually to do the stuff that's really important to you. And you're not going to do that on a 9-to-5 job. The second reason is you want to get away from that asshole with a bullwhip
Sure.
You know, I mean, we all have those folks we have to deal with, even as freelancers from time to time. But on a 9-to-5 job, you're doing that 9 to 5. You know, nobody drafted us into being freelancers, and most of us are very happy with it.
Yeah. I mean, you escape the clock, right? You don't have to keep looking at the clock, waiting, seeing like, why the fuck aren't you moving more? You know, I like that the only person who can waste my time is me. You know,
right? And I'm really good at it. I don't need any competition.
Right? I don't need anyone.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the guy with the bullwhip is in the back of my brain, so I have a very unhealthy work life.
You have to internalize it.
I mean, you are working on vacation, so there's that.
I am working on vacation. So, you know, I'm learning now again, you know, in my autumn years, I'm learning to really be able to focus on what's needed when. So as soon as this is done, I'm driving back out to the lake.
And you know, you're not you're not that much over this. I mean, Fred and I, we are new 52 in the year when there's a new 52. So there you go. Another new 52.
It's absolute Bob and Fred.
Exactly. Guys, I want to thank you so much. You know, thanks for being here and taking the time with us. Again, everybody who's watching, GAMEMASTERS, the comic book history of role-playing games, will be launching a Kickstarter very shortly. Do you guys have a date? Do you know when it's going? Because I don't yet.
We do, but our PR people weirdly are telling us not to tell you.
Yeah, I'm not saying to tell. But you guys know it's coming.
That's what I'm told.
Shortly. Definitely go
next week.
Yeah, definitely go and register for it so you'll get notified when it comes live, so that you can make Tom happy and it'll be funded immediately. But again, thanks guys for being here. We appreciate it. We're looking forward to the book.
Gentlemen, I really enjoyed this, and you allowed us to kind of talk in areas that are part of our field, but we don't get to talk about much here. And I enjoy your giving us that opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Anytime.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, we'll get you in about a half hour.
Anytime I'm in my own studio.
Okay.
I'm taking NyQuil and passing out.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
You too.
All right. Okay. So, folks, we are just about out of time. Thanks for being here. I do want to just show you guys that next week we have a show on Tuesday. Only Tuesday next week. We're only Tuesday next week. Monica Gallagher is going to be here. We are very excited about it. We will cover the news. We'll tell you what's going on in comics, and we're going to talk about Assassin Roommates and Bonnie and some cryptids. You know, we'll talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. She's one of the coolest things that Monica has ever done is she wrote and drew a book called Boobage, which is also fantastic. Which she did with dealing with her illness at the time. And let me tell you, I'm very excited for it. I'm excited for Mike to have the opportunity to talk to her. I'm excited for you guys to have the opportunity to see her talk. She's going to be on the show next week, Tuesday, the 23rd, 8 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you guys then.
That's 8 p.m. Eastern.
8 p.m. Eastern. It's actually 7 p.m. because she's in Austin. So there you go.
Oh, I like Austin. I don't like Texas, but I like Austin.
Well, you know, she's a Baltimore girl who ended up in Texas, so it's weird.
That is weird.
Yeah.
I thought there was a law against that.
There was romance involved.
I see. Yes. Well.
All right, good. Guys. Everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Hopefully everybody stays cool, and we'll see you next week.
With us. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?